The dust on Oroville's Main Street kicked up in angry clouds as Nora Mitchell stared at the ledger the banker thrust toward her. Numbers swimming before her eyes like cruel hieroglyphics she could not decipher. The afternoon sun of June 1878 beat down mercilessly on her threadbare cotton dress, but the cold sweat trickling down her spine had nothing to do with California's summer heat. Her father had been dead 3 weeks, and she had just learned that the small mercantile he had left her came with debts she never knew existed. "Miss Mitchell, I need payment by week's end or I will be forced to seize the property." Mr. Caldwell's voice held no sympathy, only the sharp edge of a man who had delivered this speech too many times to care any more. He was a wiry man with spectacles that reflected the harsh sunlight, making it impossible to see his eyes. "Your father signed these papers 6 months ago. The loan is due. $300. $300 might as well have been 3,000. Nora's fingers trembled as she touched the edge of the ledger, her mind racing through impossible calculations. The store barely brought in enough to feed her and her younger sister. Their mother had died giving birth to Emma 5 years ago, and their father had never quite recovered, drinking away his sorrows until his heart finally gave out. Now at 22, Nora was responsible for everything, and she had no idea how to carry this weight. "I do not have that kind of money," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. Around them, townspeople continued their daily routines, but she felt their curious glances, their whispered conversations. Everyone in Oroville knew everyone's business. By sundown, the whole town would know the Mitchell girls were about to lose everything. "Then I suggest you find it." Caldwell reached for the ledger, but Nora held on to it, her knuckles white. "There must be some arrangement we can make. I can pay in installments. The store is starting to do better. I have been organizing the inventory, and your father made similar promises." Caldwell's mouth pressed into a thin line. "I am not a charity, Miss Mitchell. This is business. Business." The word tasted bitter on her tongue. She wanted to scream, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but what good would that do? Her father had signed those papers. The debt was real. "Please, just give me more time." She hated the begging tone in her voice, but pride was a luxury she could not afford. Caldwell adjusted his spectacles, his expression hardening. "I have been more than patient. Your father defaulted on 2 payments before his death. The bank has its own obligations. If you cannot pay, perhaps you should consider other options." "What other options?" Nora's heart hammered against her ribs. "There are gentlemen in town who might be interested in helping a young woman in your position." The way he said it made her skin crawl. "Or you could sell the property yourself before the bank takes it. At least then you would have something." Before Nora could respond, a shadow fell across them both. She looked up to find a tall man standing beside her, his presence commanding enough that Caldwell actually took a step back. The stranger wore a dusty brown hat that shaded sharp features bronzed by sun and wind. His blue eyes, startling against his tanned skin, fixed on Caldwell with an intensity that made the banker shift his weight nervously. "Seems like I am hearing a lot of demands and not much listening," the stranger said. His voice carried a lazy drawl that somehow made his words more rather than less threatening. "This is private business," Caldwell sputtered, puffing up his narrow chest. "Private business conducted in the middle of the street where everyone can hear you badgering a lady." The stranger's hand rested casually on his belt, close to the revolver holstered at his hip. Not threatening exactly, but not friendly either. "I am Lucas Irving. I do not believe we have met." Caldwell's face went red, then pale. "Mr. Irving, I did not realize you had returned to Oroville." "Clearly." Lucas's attention shifted to Nora, and she felt the weight of that blue gaze like a physical thing. Up close, She could see he was younger than she had first thought, maybe 28 or 30, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from years of outdoor work. "Madam, how much is the debt?" Nora's throat closed. She did not know this man, did not understand why he was involving himself in her troubles. "I cannot accept $300, Caldwell interrupted, and now his tone had shifted to something almost obsequious. "But truly, Mr. Irving, this does not concern you. I am making it my concern." Lucas reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a leather wallet. Nora watched in stunned silence as he counted out bills with the casual ease of someone for whom $300 was an inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. "This covers the debt in full." "Yes, but Mr. Irving," Caldwell's protests died as Lucas pressed the money into his hands. "Then we are done here." Lucas's voice hardened. "And Caldwell, if I hear about you harassing Miss Mitchell again, we are going to have a different kind of conversation." The banker clutched the money, his face mottled with conflicting emotions. Finally, he managed a stiff nod and scurried away toward the bank, leaving Nora alone with her unexpected savior. She turned to face Lucas, a storm of emotions churning in her chest. Gratitude warred with humiliation and a fierce, stubborn pride that rebelled against accepting such a gift from a stranger. "Why did you do that?" "Because Caldwell is a vulture who preys on people when they are down." Lucas tipped his hat back slightly, studying her face. "And because no one deserves to be backed into a corner like that. I cannot accept this." The words hurt to say, but she forced them out anyway. "I do not even know you. You do now." A hint of amusement touched his mouth, not quite a smile. "Lucas Irving, as I said. I own a ranch about 10 miles north of town. I knew your father a bit, used to buy supplies from his store." Nora's mind raced, trying to place him. Her father had dealt with so many customers, and she had not paid close attention to the ranch owners. She had been too busy trying to keep the household running, caring for Emma. "That does not explain why you would pay such a sum for a stranger. Maybe I do not like seeing good people crushed by circumstances beyond their control." Lucas's expression sobered. "Your father was a decent man who got in over his head. That should not mean his daughters lose everything." The mention of Emma sent a spike of panic through Nora's chest. "I will pay you back. Every cent. I do not know how long it will take, but I swear I will. We can discuss terms later." Lucas gestured toward the mercantile down the street. "Right now, why do not you show me around the store? I could use some new supplies, and it would give you a chance to settle yourself." Nora wanted to argue, but her legs suddenly felt shaky, the adrenaline of the confrontation draining away and leaving her hollow. She nodded mutely and led the way to the Mitchell mercantile, acutely aware of Lucas walking beside her, of the curious stares from townspeople, of how her world had just shifted in ways she did not yet understand. The store smelled of dried herbs and leather, familiar scents that usually comforted her. Now everything felt strange, uncertain. She moved behind the counter, kneading the barrier between them, and watched as Lucas examined the shelves with apparent interest. His presence seemed to fill the small space. "You have organized things well," he observed, running a hand along a neat row of canned goods. "Better than when your father ran it, if I am being honest. He was not himself these last months." Nora's throat tightened. "After my mother died, something broke in him. I tried to help, but I could not fix what was wrong inside him." Lucas turned to face her fully, his expression gentle. "No one expects you to have fixed him, Nora. May I call you Nora?" She nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in her throat. No one had been kind to her since her father's death. Everyone had offered condolences, but there had been an edge of judgment too. Whispers about her father's drinking, speculation about what would happen to the Mitchell girls now. Lucas's straightforward compassion undid something in her. "I do not know how to repay you," she said finally. $300 is more money than I have ever seen in one place. How about this?" Lucas leaned against the counter, casual and at ease in a way she envied. "I need someone to handle supply orders for the ranch. My foreman has been doing it, but he is better with cattle than paperwork. I saw how you organized this place. You clearly have a head for business. Work for me and we will call it even." Nora stared at him, searching for the catch. "That does not seem like a fair exchange." "Fair is a matter of perspective." Lucas's blue eyes held hers. "I need the help, you need the income. Seems fair enough to me. I have my sister to care for. I cannot leave her alone. Bring her with you. My ranch is not some rough camp. I have a proper house and my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, would appreciate the company. Emma is about 5 years old, yes." The fact that he knew Emma's name surprised her. "You really did know my father." "I pay attention." Lucas straightened, settling his hat more firmly on his head. "Think about it. I will come by tomorrow for your answer. In the meantime, put together an order of supplies for me. Flour, sugar, coffee, beans, whatever you think a ranch household needs. Consider it your first task." Before Nora could respond, the door banged open and Emma herself rushed in, her dark braids flying behind her. "Nora, Mrs. Patterson said a cowboy gave Mr. Caldwell money for us. Is it true? Are we not going to lose the store?" Nora caught her sister in her arms, holding tight to the small, wriggling body. "It is true. This is Mr. Irving. He helped us." Emma's dark eyes, so like their father's, fixed on Lucas with open curiosity. "Are you really a cowboy?" "I suppose I am." Lucas's expression softened in a way that made Nora's heart skip unexpectedly. "Do you like horses, Emma?" "I have never ridden one." Emma's voice held wistful longing. "Papa said maybe someday." "Well, if your sister agrees to work for me, you will have plenty of chances to ride." Lucas tipped his hat to them both. "Ladies, I will see you tomorrow." He left before Nora could gather her scattered thoughts, the door closing with a soft click behind him. Emma immediately started chattering about horses and cowboys and adventures, but Nora barely heard her. She moved to the window and watched Lucas mount a beautiful roan horse tied to the post outside. He sat the saddle with the easy grace of someone who had been riding since childhood, and as he rode away, several townspeople called greetings to him. Lucas Irving was clearly well known and respected in Oroville, which begged the question of why a successful rancher would involve himself so thoroughly in the problems of 2 orphaned girls. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep in the small room they shared above the store, Nora sat at her father's old desk and tried to make sense of everything. She pulled out the ledger Lucas had paid, studying the numbers by lamplight. $300 plus interest. Her father's shaky signature at the bottom, dated 6 months ago when he had still been walking around but had already been a ghost of himself. She thought about Lucas's offer, turning it over in her mind from every angle, searching for the trap. But no matter how she examined it, the offer seemed genuine. He needed help, she needed income and a way to repay her debt. It was logical. What was not logical was the way her pulse had quickened when he had looked at her with those steady blue eyes, or the flutter in her stomach when he had smiled at Emma. Nora had no time or space in her life for such foolishness. She was responsible for Emma, for keeping them fed and housed and safe. She could not afford to be distracted by a handsome cowboy with a kind streak. But as she finally blew out the lamp and climbed into bed beside her sister, she found herself thinking about Lucas's hands as he had counted out those bills, strong and sure and confident. She thought about the way he had stepped between her and Caldwell without hesitation, the casual authority in his voice. Most men she knew would have walked past, not wanting to involve themselves in messy situations. Lucas Irving had not walked past. The next morning dawned bright and hot, promising another scorching California day. Nora rose early, as always, and set about preparing the store for opening. She had stayed up late working on the supply order Lucas had requested, and the detailed list sat on the counter, ready for his inspection. She told herself the extra care she had taken with her appearance, the blue calico dress that brought out her eyes, the careful arrangement of her honey-colored hair, had nothing to do with his promised visit. Emma helped stock shelves, humming to herself, her earlier worries forgotten with the resilience of childhood. Nora envied that ability to bounce back, to not carry the weight of constant anxiety. Every customer who came through the door was a reminder that they needed to make this store profitable. That one disaster had been averted, but countless others waited in the wings. Lucas arrived mid-morning, his arrival announced by the jingle of spurs and Emma's delighted cry of "The Cowboy is back." He filled the doorway with his presence before stepping inside, removing his hat in a gesture of courtesy that felt oddly old-fashioned. His dark hair curled slightly at the collar, and Nora noticed a fresh cut on his jaw as though he had shaved carelessly in a hurry. "Morning," he said, his drawl more pronounced today. "I hope you have had time to think about my offer." Nora placed her hands flat on the counter, steadying herself. "I have conditions. I would expect nothing less." Lucas approached the counter, his eyes crinkling at the corners with something that might have been approval. "Let us hear them." "I keep the store open 3 days a week. I cannot abandon it entirely. My father built this place, and I will not let it die." "Fair enough. Emma comes with me to the ranch, and she is my responsibility. Your housekeeper is not expected to watch over her. Also fair. And I want a clear accounting of what I owe you and how my work is credited against the debt. I will not be kept in the dark about finances." This was the most important condition, and she held his gaze steadily as she delivered it. Lucas nodded slowly. "I respect that. How about this? Standard wage for supply management is $25 a month. We will credit that against the $300 you owe me, which means 12 months of work clears the debt. Does that seem reasonable?" Nora did the calculation quickly in her head. It was actually more than reasonable. It was generous. Most women's work paid less than that. "Why are you being so kind to us? Why does kindness need a reason?" Lucas leaned against the counter, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his blue eyes. "Maybe I see potential in a smart woman who has been dealt a bad hand. Maybe I think you deserve a chance to prove what you can do without men like Caldwell breathing down your neck. Does it matter? It matters because I need to understand what you expect in return." Something flickered across Lucas's face, an emotion too quick to identify. "I expect good work. Honesty. And maybe, if I am lucky, eventually you will stop looking at me like I am going to pull the rug out from under you." Emma chose that moment to tug on Lucas's sleeve, her small face tilted up hopefully. "Can I really ride a horse?" Lucas crouched down to Emma's level, his expression transforming into something warm and open. "Absolutely. I have a gentle mare named Daisy who would love to meet you. Would you like that?" "Yes." Emma bounced on her toes. "When can we go? Can we go now?" Emma manners. Nora's correction was automatic, but she felt her resistance crumbling. Lucas was offering them a lifeline, and more than that, he genuinely seemed to care about her sister's happiness. How could she refuse that? "I will take that as a yes." Lucas stood, returning his attention to Nora. "I brought a wagon. We can load your supplies and head out whenever you are ready." Everything was moving so fast. Yesterday Nora had thought she was losing everything, and now she was preparing to upend her entire life based on the word of a man she barely knew. It was reckless and impulsive and completely unlike her usual careful nature. But what choice did she have? And if she was being honest with herself, there was a part of her, a part she usually kept locked away tight, that wanted this adventure. Wanted to see what lay beyond the narrow confines of Oroville's dusty streets. Wanted to know what it felt like to be looked at the way Lucas looked at her, like she was capable and interesting and worth his time. "Give me an hour," she heard herself say. "I need to pack our things and ask Mrs. Patterson to check on the store while I am gone." Lucas's answering smile was bright enough to rival the California sun. "Take your time. I will load the supplies." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Nora packed their clothes and personal items, trying not to think too hard about what she was doing. Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor, promised to keep an eye on the store and spread the word that Miss Mitchell would be open for business on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. The older woman's eyes twinkled knowingly as she watched Lucas load boxes into his wagon with casual strength. "That Lucas Irving is a good man," Mrs. Patterson said quietly. "His father was a hard man, mean when he drank. Lucas took over the ranch 5 years ago when his father died, and by all accounts he has run it well. Treats his workers fair, pays on time. You could do worse, dear." "It is just a job," Nora protested, but her cheeks heated under Mrs. Patterson's knowing look. "Of course it is," the older woman agreed, in a tone that suggested she believed nothing of the sort. The ride to the ranch took just over an hour, the wagon rattling over rutted dirt roads that wound through golden hills dotted with oak trees. Emma sat between Nora and Lucas on the wagon seat, asking an endless stream of questions that Lucas answered with remarkable patience. Nora found herself relaxing slightly, lulled by the rhythm of the horses' hooves and the warm breeze carrying the scent of dry grass and wildflowers. "The ranch is about 500 acres, Lucas explained as they crested a hill and the property came into view below. "I run about 200 head of cattle plus horses. Got 6 men working full-time, plus seasonal help during roundup. It is not the biggest operation in California, but it is mine, and I am proud of it." Nora could see why. The ranch house was a sprawling single-story structure built of adobe and wood, with a wide porch that wrapped around at least 2 sides. Outbuildings dotted the property, all in good repair, and she could see horses grazing in a fenced pasture. Everything spoke of care and attention, of a man who took his responsibilities seriously. A small, thin woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. Her hair, streaked with silver, was pulled back in a neat bun, and her weathered face broke into a smile when she saw Lucas. "You brought company," she called out. "About time you had some life around here besides smelly cowboys. Mrs. Chen, meet Nora Mitchell and her sister Emma. They are going to be staying with us for a while. Nora is taking over supply management." Mrs. Chen's dark eyes swept over them both, shrewd and assessing, but not unkind. "Welcome. I have been telling this stubborn man he needs help with the paperwork. Come, I will show you to your rooms." The interior of the ranch house surprised Nora with its comfort. The main room featured a large stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and windows that let in plenty of light. Mrs. Chen led them down a hallway to 2 adjoining bedrooms, both clean and simply furnished. "The bath is through there," Mrs. Chen pointed. "We have a good well, so do not worry about using water. Dinner is at 6. Lucas likes his meals on time." She paused, studying Nora more closely. "You look worn out, girl. When did you last eat properly?" Nora opened her mouth to insist she was fine, but her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "I will bring you something now. You rest a bit, get settled. Work can wait until tomorrow." She bustled out before Nora could protest. Emma immediately claimed the smaller bedroom, delighted by the window overlooking the horse pasture. Nora sank onto the bed in the larger room, suddenly exhausted. The events of the past 24 hours crashed over her, and she had to blink back unexpected tears. A soft knock on the doorframe made her look up. Lucas stood there, his hat in his hands, his expression concerned. "Are you all right?" "I am fine." She wiped at her eyes quickly. "Just overwhelmed, I suppose." "That is understandable." He did not come into the room, respecting the boundary. "Nora, I want you to know you are safe here. I am not going to take advantage of your situation or expect anything beyond what we agreed. You have my word on that." The fact that he had thought to say it, to address the worry she had not quite let herself fully acknowledge, made something tight in Nora's chest loosen slightly. "Thank you. That means more than you know. Get some rest. Tomorrow is soon enough to start work." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Nora, I am glad you are here." After he left, Nora lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything. She had uprooted her entire life based on trust in a near stranger. It was either the bravest or the most foolish thing she had ever done. Only time would tell which. The following weeks fell into a rhythm that Nora found unexpectedly comfortable. She woke early and took her breakfast with Lucas and Mrs. Chen, then spent the morning working through the ranch's chaotic supply records. Lucas had not been exaggerating about his foreman's paperwork skills. It took her 3 full days just to establish what supplies they actually had versus what the records claimed. Emma thrived in the ranch environment, following Lucas around like a devoted shadow whenever he was near the house. He took her promise about the horses seriously, setting her up on gentle Daisy and leading her around the corral until Emma's confidence grew and her laughter rang out across the property. Watching them together did something strange to Nora's heart, made her imagine impossible futures she had no business contemplating. Lucas himself remained unfailingly polite and respectful, but Nora caught him watching her sometimes, his blue eyes following her movements with an intensity that made her skin warm. She told herself she was imagining things, that a man like Lucas Irving, who could have his pick of women, would not be interested in a struggling shopkeeper with more responsibilities than prospects. But then, there were moments that felt like more than simple courtesy. The way he brought her coffee without being asked, prepared exactly how she liked it. The careful attention he paid when she talked about her ideas for improving the ranch's inventory system. The time he found her crying quietly over a letter from one of her father's creditors and simply sat with her until the storm passed, not offering empty platitudes, just steady presence. One evening about a month into her stay, Nora was working late in the small office Lucas had set up for her, trying to finish reconciling the quarter's expenses. Everyone else had gone to bed, but she was determined to complete this task. She was so focused on the numbers that she did not hear Lucas approach until he spoke. "You are going to ruin your eyes working by lamplight like this." Nora jumped, her pen skittering across the page. "I did not hear you come in." "Sorry." Lucas did not look particularly sorry. He carried 2 cups of coffee and set one beside her on the desk. "I saw your light still on and thought you could use this." "Thank you." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for the comfort. "I am almost finished." Instead of leaving, Lucas pulled up a chair and sat beside her. He smelled of hay and leather and something else, something distinctly him that Nora had come to recognize. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you push yourself so hard?" His voice was gentle, curious rather than critical. "You are ahead on every task I have given you. You have transformed my disaster of a supply system into something that actually makes sense. But you act like if you stop moving, Everything will fall apart. Nora stared at the ledger in front of her, the neat columns of numbers blurring, because that is what happens. When I let my guard down, when I trust that things will be all right, that is when disaster strikes. My mother died. My father fell apart. We nearly lost everything. I cannot afford to relax. That is not living, Nora. That is just surviving. She looked at him then, really looked at him. In the soft lamplight, his features seemed gentler, more approachable. There was understanding in his eyes, as though he knew something about just surviving versus truly living. "I do not know how to do anything else," she admitted quietly. Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and covered her hand with his. His palm was calloused and warm, and the touch sent electricity singing through her nerves. Maybe it is time to learn. Nora's breath caught. They were sitting close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the exact shade of blue in his eyes, the way his mouth curved just slightly, even when he was not quite smiling. Something was happening between them, something that had been building since the day he had stepped in to pay her debt, and she was not sure whether to lean into it or run away. "Lucas," she started, but did not know how to finish. "I know," he said, as though she had completed the sentence. "I know this complicates things. I know you probably think I have some ulterior motive, that I paid your debt because I expected something in return. But Nora, the truth is simpler and more complicated than that." "What truth?" "That from the moment I saw you standing up to Caldwell, refusing to back down even though you were terrified, I have not been able to stop thinking about you." His thumb traced a gentle circle on the back of her hand. "That I find myself making excuses to come back to the house during the day just to see you. That watching you with Emma, seeing how you love her and protect her, and would do anything for her, makes me want things I had convinced myself I did not need." Nora's heart hammered so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "What things?" "A family, a partner, someone to build a life with." Lucas's voice dropped lower, rougher. "I am not saying this to pressure you. You do not owe me anything, and if you want to keep this strictly business, I will respect that. But I would be lying if I said I did not hope for more." Every rational part of Nora's brain screamed at her to be cautious, to protect herself and Emma, to not risk their security on something as unreliable as feelings. But her heart, the part of her she had kept locked away for so long, yearned toward him like a flower toward sunlight. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I know." Lucas's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch feather light. "But Nora, you are also the bravest person I know. You face down impossible situations every day. Maybe you could be brave enough to take a chance on this, on us." When he kissed her, it was gentle and questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Nora did not pull away. Instead, she leaned into the kiss, into him, and let herself feel for the first time in years. His lips were soft and sure, and the kiss spoke of patience and promise and possibilities that made her head spin. When they finally broke apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that for weeks. Only weeks." Nora surprised herself with her own boldness. "I have wanted it since the second day." His delighted laugh filled the small office, and then he was kissing her again, less gentle this time, more urgent. Nora's hands found their way to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him under her fingers, and she thought maybe, just maybe, letting someone else help carry the weight might not be weakness after all. Over the following months, Nora and Lucas navigated their new relationship with a mixture of joy and trepidation. Lucas courted her properly, despite the fact that she was already living under his roof, taking her on evening rides through the golden California hills and stolen picnics by the creek that wound through his property. He treated Emma like she was precious, teaching her to ride and rope and all the skills of ranch life, and Nora's sister bloomed under the attention. Nora continued to run the store 3 days a week, and Lucas never complained about the arrangement, often accompanying her into town and helping with heavy lifting or difficult customers. The townspeople of Oroville quickly figured out that Lucas Irving was courting the Mitchell girl, and while there was some gossip, most of it was approving. Lucas was well liked, and everyone agreed that Nora deserved some happiness after the hard year she had endured. The moment Nora knew she was truly, irrevocably in love came on a Tuesday in late October. She had been running the store alone while Lucas handled some business with a cattle buyer. Emma was at the ranch with Mrs. Chen, learning to bake bread. The bell over the door chimed and Caldwell walked in. Nora's entire body went rigid. She had not seen the banker since the day Lucas had paid her debt, and she had been content with that state of affairs. Caldwell looked older somehow, more haggard, and he would not quite meet her eyes. "Miss Mitchell," he said stiffly, "I hoped I might find you here." "The store is open for business, Mr. Caldwell. Do you need something?" She kept her voice cool and professional. "Actually, I came to apologize." The words seemed dragged from him reluctantly. "My behavior that day on the street was inappropriate. You were in a difficult situation, and I should have shown more compassion." Nora studied him, searching for the angle. "What prompted this sudden change of heart?" Caldwell's mouth twisted. "Mr. Irving made it clear that my continued employment at the bank depends on treating all customers with respect, regardless of their circumstances. He holds significant investments there, and when he speaks, the board listens." So Lucas had not only paid her debt, but had also ensured Caldwell would not prey on anyone else the same way. The knowledge filled Nora with a warmth that had nothing to do with the autumn sunlight streaming through the windows. Lucas had protected her even when she did not know she needed protecting. "I appreciate your apology, Mr. Caldwell," she said formally. "Was there anything else?" He shook his head and left quickly, as though relieved to have the awkward conversation over. Nora sank onto the stool behind the counter, her hands shaking slightly. A year ago, Caldwell's appearance would have sent her into a panic spiral. Now, protected by Lucas's care and her own growing confidence, she felt only a distant annoyance. That evening, after they had returned to the ranch and Emma had been tucked into bed, Nora found Lucas on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. She moved to stand beside him, and his arm came around her waist automatically, pulling her close. "Caldwell came to the store today," she said quietly. Lucas tensed. "Did he cause trouble?" "I swear if he—" "No, nothing like that. He apologized. Mentioned that you had made sure he understood the importance of treating customers with respect." She turned to face him fully. "You did not tell me you had done that." "I did not do it for gratitude." Lucas's voice was gruff. "I did it because men like Caldwell need to understand there are consequences for bullying people. You're a good man, Lucas Irving." Nora reached up to trace the line of his jaw, feeling the slight rasp of evening stubble. "I love you." She had not planned to say it, but once the words were out, she felt nothing but relief. They were true, and he deserved to know. Lucas went very still. "Say that again." "I love you." Stronger this time, more certain. "I love how you treat Emma like she matters. I love how you never make me feel weak for needing help. I love that you see me, really see me, and you do not try to make me into something I am not. I just love you." "Nora." Her name was half prayer, half plea. Then he was kissing her with a desperation that stole her breath, his hands cradling her face like she was something infinitely precious. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you too. God, I love you so much." I have been trying to figure out the right time to say it, the right way to say it, and here you are, beating me to it. Is this real? Nora could not quite believe it, this happiness blooming in her chest like spring flowers. This is not going to disappear. It is real. Lucas pressed a kiss to her forehead, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. And I am not going anywhere. Nora, I want to marry you. I want Emma to be our daughter officially. I want to build a life with you, a real life, full of all the messy, beautiful, complicated things that make life worth living. Are you proposing to me? Her voice shook with joy and disbelief. Not yet, not officially. Lucas's smile was crooked and achingly tender. When I propose, I will do it right, but I am telling you my intentions so you know where my heart is. So you know that I am thinking about forever when I look at you. Nora kissed him again, pouring everything she felt into it, all the love and hope and barely believed joy that filled her to bursting. I am thinking about forever too. True to his word, Lucas proposed properly a month later on a cold December evening. He took her riding to a hilltop overlooking the ranch, wrapped her in blankets against the chill, and showed her where he wanted to expand the house to make room for a growing family. Then he knelt in the frost-crisp grass and offered her a simple gold ring that had belonged to his mother. Nora Mitchell, you came into my life when I did not even realize I was just going through the motions. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to want things, to believe in the future. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you make me? Through tears of joy, Nora said yes. They married in January 1879, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Oroville. Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Patterson stood up with them, and Emma was beside herself with excitement at being part of the wedding party. The whole town turned out, proof that the people of Oroville genuinely cared about the Mitchell girls and approved of Lucas Irving claiming them as his own. After the ceremony, Lucas lifted Emma onto his shoulders and took Nora's hand, leading his new family home to the ranch. That night, with Emma asleep in her room and the vast California sky full of stars visible through their bedroom window, Lucas and Nora began their married life with a tenderness and passion that spoke of deep love and absolute trust. The years that followed were full and rich and occasionally challenging, but always filled with love. Emma grew up riding horses and helping with ranch work, developing into a confident young woman who knew she was cherished. Nora's store continued to thrive, becoming a fixture of Oroville's community. She and Lucas worked as partners in all things, their strengths complementing each other perfectly. 2 years after their wedding, Nora gave birth to a son they named Samuel, a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. 3 years after that came twin girls, Rebecca and Rose, who kept everyone on their toes with their endless energy and creative mischief. Lucas proved to be an exceptional father, patient and loving, never playing favorites among the children. Emma, despite being adopted rather than born into the family, was never treated as anything less than a full Irving. When she turned 18, Lucas formally adopted her, making it legal what had always been true in their hearts. She cried through the entire court proceeding, and Lucas held her afterward and told her he had never been prouder of anything than being her father. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Nora back to the hilltop where he had proposed. Their children were with Mrs. Chen, giving them a rare evening alone. The ranch had expanded significantly, now encompassing nearly 1,000 acres and employing 20 men. Nora's business acumen had helped make Irving Ranch one of the most prosperous operations in Northern California. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked, his arm around her waist as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Tying yourself to a cowboy when you could have had an easier life," Nora looked at him in genuine surprise. Easier? Lucas, you gave me a life. Before you stepped in that day, I was drowning. I could not see any way forward that did not end in disaster. You did not just pay my debt. You showed me that I did not have to carry everything alone, that asking for help and accepting love were not weaknesses but strengths. You would have found your way, Lucas said softly. You are the strongest person I know, maybe, but I would not have found this. She gestured at the ranch below them, where lights were beginning to glow in the windows of their expanded house, where their children were probably driving Mrs. Chen crazy before bedtime. I would not have found happiness and laughter and the kind of love that makes every challenge bearable. You gave me that. We gave each other that. Lucas turned her in his arms so they faced each other fully. 10 years of marriage had added silver to his dark hair and fine lines around his eyes. But to Nora, he was as handsome as the day he had stepped between her and Caldwell. A stranger willing to help for no reason except it was the right thing to do. I love you, Nora Irving, he said, as he had said countless times over the past decade and would say countless more times in the decades to come. More today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow. I love you too, she replied, rising on her toes to kiss him as the California sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. Forever and always. Below them, their children's laughter carried on the evening breeze, and in that moment, Nora felt the bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly who she was meant to be with. The frightened young woman who had not known how to pay the man demanding money seemed like someone from another lifetime, someone Nora could barely remember being. That woman had been saved by a cowboy who stepped in and handled everything. But more than that, she had been loved back to life by a man who saw her worth when she could not see it herself. And together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a family and a life filled with the kind of joy Nora had once thought impossible. The years continued to pass in the way years do, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their children growing up. Samuel developed his father's way with horses and his mother's head for numbers, eventually taking over much of the ranch's business operations. The twins, inseparable as children, grew into young women who balanced each other perfectly. Rebecca practical and grounded, Rose creative and dreamy. Emma married at 23, a good man from Sacramento who worked as a teacher and treated her like the treasure she was. Lucas walked her down the aisle with pride shining in his eyes, and afterward Nora found him sitting alone in the barn, crying quiet tears of bittersweet joy. She sat beside him and held his hand, understanding without words what he felt. Their first child, in every way that mattered, was beginning her own life, and it was both wonderful and heartbreaking. We raised her well, Nora said softly. She is going to be so happy. I know. Lucas wiped at his eyes, unashamed of the tears. I just remember that scared little girl who asked if she could really ride a horse, and now look at her. Confident and loved and ready to take on the world. We did that. You and I together. We did, Nora agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. And we will do it 3 more times before we are done. Lucas laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet barn. God help us. But they did, shepherding each of their children into adulthood with the same love and attention that had characterized their entire marriage. Samuel married a rancher's daughter from the next county over, expanding the Irving holdings through the union, but more importantly finding genuine love and partnership. Rebecca became a doctor, something virtually unheard of for a woman in that era, but Lucas and Nora supported her ambitions without reservation. Rose discovered a talent for painting and moved to San Francisco to study art. sending home beautiful canvases that Nora hung with pride throughout the house. Through it all, Lucas and Nora remained each other's anchor and compass. They weathered droughts that threatened the ranch's survival, economic panics that challenged their financial security, and the inevitable sorrows that come with living, including the deaths of Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Patterson, both of whom lived to ripe old ages and were mourned deeply by the Irving family. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Emma had 3 children of her own now, Samuel too, and even Rebecca had recently married and was expecting her first. The house rang with laughter and chaos, exactly as Nora and Lucas had always hoped it would. That evening, after the guests had departed and the house had finally quieted, Nora and Lucas walked together through the ranch they had built together. Nora was 50 years old now, Lucas nearing 60, but their hands still fit together perfectly, and the spark between them had never dimmed. 25 years, Lucas mused. A quarter-century since I saw a beautiful woman refusing to back down from a bully and decided to make her my business. Best decision you ever made, Nora teased. The only decision that mattered, Lucas corrected, his voice serious despite the light tone. Everything good in my life traces back to that moment. You, our children, this life we built. All of it started because you were brave enough to accept help, and I was stubborn enough to offer it. Nora stopped walking, turning to face her husband in the moonlight. His hair was more silver than dark now, and there were deep lines carved around his eyes and mouth from decades of laughter and hard work. To her, he had never been more handsome. "You know what I think about sometimes?" she asked softly. "I think about that frightened girl in the street, convinced her world was ending, and I wish I could tell her that everything was going to be all right. Better than all right. That the man demanding money would be paid, that the cowboy stepping in would become the love of her life, that she would build something beautiful from the ashes of her father's failure." "She became someone extraordinary," Lucas said, cupping her face in his weathered hands. "She became you, Nora. Strong and capable and loved beyond measure. I am so damn proud of you." Nora kissed him, long and deep and full of all the passion that 25 years of marriage had not diminished. "And I am grateful for you. Every single day, I am grateful that you were the man walking by that afternoon. That you were the one who saw me and decided I was worth saving. We saved each other," Lucas whispered against her lips. "That is what love is, I think. 2 people choosing each other again and again, building something together that neither could build alone." They made their way back to the house hand in hand, past the corrals where horses dozed in the moonlight, past the barn where Lucas had first kissed her breathless so many years ago, past the gardens that Nora had planted and tended until they flourished. Everything they passed was a testament to their partnership, to the life they had created through love and hard work and unwavering commitment to each other. In their bedroom, the same bedroom they had shared for 25 years, Lucas undressed his wife with the reverent care of a man who still found her beautiful, still wanted her as desperately as he had on their wedding night. Nora returned that care and that desire, her hands tracing the familiar landscape of his body, finding the places that made him gasp and sigh. They made love slowly, tenderly, with the deep intimacy of 2 people who knew each other completely and chose each other anyway. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Nora felt the kind of peace that only comes from a life well lived and love well earned. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for stepping in that day. Thank you for handling everything when I could not. Thank you for showing me what it means to be truly loved." "Always," Lucas murmured, already half asleep but still managing to press a kiss to the top of her head. "I will always step in for you, Nora. That is what love does. The years continued their march forward, bringing both joy and sorrow as years always do. Lucas's health began to fail in his 70s, his body worn down by decades of hard physical labor. But his spirit remained strong, and his love for Nora never wavered. She cared for him with the same fierce devotion he had shown her, refusing to let anyone else take over his care. "I am not losing you yet," she told him firmly when he protested that she was wearing herself out. "You saved me, Lucas Irving. You let me save you in return." He lived to see all of his children settled and happy, to hold a dozen grandchildren, and even 3 great-grandchildren. On a warm spring evening in 1915, with Nora holding his hand and their children gathered around his bed, Lucas Irving closed his eyes for the last time, secure in the knowledge that he was deeply loved, and that his legacy would continue through the family he and Nora had built together. Nora grieved deeply, as was only natural after losing the love of her life, but she did not fall apart. Lucas had taught her that she was stronger than she knew, and she honored his memory by continuing to live fully, to engage with her family, to find joy in her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She lived another 8 years after Lucas's death, remaining sharp and active until the very end. On a quiet autumn afternoon in 1923, surrounded by her children, and with Emma holding her hand just as she had once held Lucas's, Nora Mitchell, Irving passed peacefully, ready to rejoin the cowboy who had stepped in and changed her life forever. At her funeral, Emma stood to speak, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. She was 68 years old now, but in that moment she looked like the frightened 5-year-old who had rushed into the store asking if the cowboy had really saved them. "My mother and father taught me what love looks like," Emma said, her voice carrying across the crowded church. "Not the easy kind of love that exists when everything is perfect, but the real kind. The kind that steps in when someone is drowning and says, 'I will help carry this.' The kind that sees someone at their worst and says you are still worthy of love. The kind that builds something beautiful from broken pieces." She paused, looking at the photograph of Nora and Lucas that sat beside the casket, taken on their 25th anniversary. They were looking at each other rather than the camera, their faces alight with joy and love. "They saved each other," Emma continued. "And in doing so, they saved all of us. They showed us how to love well, how to build a life of meaning and purpose, how to face challenges without losing hope. That is their legacy. That is what lives on in every person they touched, every child and grandchild and great-grandchild who carries their love forward into the future." After the service, as the family gathered at the ranch for the traditional meal, Samuel stood on the porch his father had built and his mother had loved, looking out over the land that bore the Irving name. His own grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter a reminder that life continues, that love persists beyond death. "They had a good life," his wife said softly, coming to stand beside him. "They had a great life," Samuel corrected. "Because they chose each other every day for over 45 years. That is rare. That is special. That is what I want for all of our children and grandchildren. Love like that, partnership like that, commitment like that." Inside the house, Emma sat in her mother's favorite chair and thought about the day a cowboy had stepped in to help a desperate young woman who did not know how to pay the man demanding money. She thought about how that single act of kindness had rippled outward, creating waves of love and family and legacy that would continue long after everyone involved in that initial moment had turned to dust. Her father had stepped in and handled everything. It was true. But more than that, he had seen something worth saving in her mother, worth investing in, worth loving. And her mother had been brave enough to accept that love, to believe she deserved it, to build a life worthy of the gift she had been given. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, Emma thought, full of courage and adventure and challenges overcome. But more than that, it was a love story worthy of any place or time, because at its heart was a simple, eternal truth. Love transforms, love heals, love saves. And sometimes love starts with a cowboy who steps in when someone needs help, and stays because he has found his home. The sun set over Irving Ranch that evening, painting the California sky in shades of gold and crimson, the colors of endings and beginnings intertwined. In the house that Lucas built and Nora made a home, their family gathered to remember and celebrate and grieve. And somewhere in the fading light, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together were finally reunited, their story complete, their love eternal.